What is up, party people? Today I am talking with LauraAura, who is a keynote speaker, personal growth coach, and host of the Gutsy Podcast, which is a top 100 show helping people own their desires and take gutsy action, which I just love, and I'm very excited for our conversation. She works with ambitious women and leaders who built successful lives on paper, but still feel like something's missing. And so I know that's going to relate to a lot of you listening. And her approach is all about helping people get out of their own way, cut through that overthinking that we know we do, and actually make some moves that align with who they really are. So clearly, it just made natural sense to have her on the show. I'm excited to dig into hesitation, burnout, what it really takes to kind of make a change when you're scared that it might look crazy from the outside, and how to do all of this while you're trying to deal with everything else. So without further ado, let's get into it. LauraAura, welcome to the Balanced Badass Podcast.
Sarah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I always like to start my guest episodes with my favorite icebreaker question, and that is, what is something that you're loving in your life right now?
I'm honestly loving everything. I mean, truly,
good.
like I'm to get maybe even a little bit more specific. I'm just really loving the way that like my career is going and the way that that is impacting my life. Like I've spent a lot of
Nice.
time fighting myself, figuring things out, doing all the things that I was supposed to do. And I've done all the inner work, and I've made the big moves, and I've made all the little moves, and I'm really, really starting to live the way that I always thought that I could. So I'm freaking loving that.
I love that for you.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of right there with you. Like, looking back on my career, I first off never would have guessed that my career trajectory was going to take me to where I am now, but I'm so glad that it has, because it has really been like I'm at home in what I do
Yeah.
now, and that piece falling into place has really helped to like the rest of my life kind of domino effect fall into
Yeah.
place too.
Same.
So
I did not start off doing this work. I made a really big career pivot 2 years ago. When I sold my branding agency. My background's in branding and graphic design, and I ran an agency for 16 years. I spent 22 years as a graphic designer. Didn't set out to be a keynote speaker, didn't set out to coach people, but it, when you find the work, right? I think sometimes we set out on this quest to find our purpose, and when it's not coming together, we get frustrated or discouraged. And it's like, sometimes we just need to go down the journey so that the purpose can find us. And that's, I think that's what I did.
yeah, that's good. Well, that kind of really segues into, I think, my first question. So I love that your whole thing is about making gutsy moves. That's what drew
That's
me
my jam.
to having you. Yeah. So now I work with a lot of folks who are so burned out at this point that they can barely even make a grocery list, let alone some big life altering decision. And I totally get it, because I've been there too. So my question is, how do you help someone take that gutsy action when they are at that point? Like, what are the steps that you take with those folks?
Well, I first want to say that making a gutsy move does not have to be a big thing. In fact, more often than not, it's a series of small, tiny moves and decisions that we make. And so if you're really experiencing burnout, if you're like, one more thing and I'm going to flip the table over, like we don't need to make giant shifts. And in fact, we really shouldn't make big life changes and decisions in moments of complete burnout, of feeling completely disconnected. That can be challenging. It's not always wrong, but it can be challenging. Where we really need to focus is where do we need to start pouring back in? And so those moves don't have to be big. In fact, I want you to start focusing on the little things, like the little gutsy moves that you can make. It's those little moves that add up to the bigger changes. And so a gutsy move might be choosing to sit in silence for 10 minutes and drink your coffee or your tea this morning instead of jumping right into email. That's a gutsy move. It might be choosing to say no to an obligation that you said yes to, or feel like you should go to this thing. A gutsy move is saying, I really need a time at home today. No, thank you. Right? Like, so I just want everyone to really know and understand that being gutsy does not require big. It does not require bold. It does not require giant leaps. It can be. But if you're really in a space of burnout, I want you to start focusing on the micro levels of choosing yourself. That's the gutsy move that I want you to focus on.
Yeah, I talk so much about we need to go back to the basics before we can even think about making a decision. I'm right on the same page with you as far as you're in burnout, your nervous system is fried. You don't have the clarity to be able to make informed, educated decisions on kind of what's next. And I love that you're talking about like these small things, and these are gutsy things because they're interrupting a pattern probably that you've established for a long time. So it's very hard to do that. So that's where the gutsy piece I think comes
Absolutely.
from, right?
And it's, a lot of times we don't get into burnout because we've prioritized ourselves. Shocking news here, friends, in the headlines. So being gutsy is, like you said, interrupting that pattern, but it's choosing yourself, maybe for the first time ever, or the first time in a really long time. So it's gutsy to break a pattern. It's gutsy to change the way that you've been doing something. It's gutsy to choose yourself when you typically choose other people. I mean, at the foundation, it's choosing you again. And the way that we get out of burnout is choosing you. You have to start setting those boundaries. You have to start making decisions that support the life and the energy and the vitality that you want instead of going against it.
Yeah. So there's something that I'm seeing show up in a lot of my conversations, like with my clients or even in my comments or DMs on my content, and that's hesitation. So maybe when someone kind of knows what they need to do or what they want to do, but they keep talking themselves out of it. I talk about, like I say, they should themselves. They're just shooting themselves out of anything. So what's really going on there, do you think? Like, what do you see in the work that you do that might help us understand that a little bit
I mean,
more?
hesitation can come in all shapes and sizes, right? It can show up when you're not sure. It can show up when you're faced with making a change. It can show up when you're uncomfortable. It can show up when you're uncertain. But I find more often than not, that hesitation is really rooted in resistance. It's the resistance that is making it feel like you're spinning through mud. It's the resistance that feels like a 500-pound chain that you're dragging behind you. And that the thing that you want the most is often behind the thing that you resist the most. I'll say it louder for those in the back. The thing that you want the most is often behind the thing that you resist the most. And so usually when we're like bumping up against a shift or a change or a decision that's uncomfortable or it's new or we just don't know, resistance is going to come up. I'm going to go back to what I know because it's comfortable. It's not what I want anymore, but I know how to handle it. I know how to talk about it. I know how to complain about it. I know how to think about it. It's familiar. It's familiar territory. And so the reality and what I like to dig in with people is, what are you actually resisting? Is it change? Is it certainty? Is it the newness? Is it vulnerability? There's always something on the underside of hesitation that's driving that.
Yeah. And I think too, an exploration into not just what are you resisting, but why, right? Because that certainly helps. I think so much. I had a client the other day. She's like, you ask me a lot of questions. And I'm like, yes, that's kind of the point.
That's what we're doing. That, the questions lead to answers that lead to questions that lead to answers. And it's an excavation project, when we can get down to the root of what's driving this in the first place, I mean, that gives you freedom. Now we understand what's
Yes.
going on, what's happening, what's driving this. And now we can consciously choose what we want to do instead. Again, you don't have to flip the table over tomorrow. You don't have to make giant decisions. In fact, I want you to really start focusing on, how do I support the thing that I want? And side quest here, what do you want in the first place? Big question. Ding, ding, ding. Like, we don't even, when I ask women that, usually the answer is, I have no idea. No one's ever asked me that before. I haven't had time to think about that. I'm not allowed to go there, And so we have to first answer what it is that we actually want, and to also even figure out how we're resisting it in the first place.
Yeah, I find that identifying the what first, then kind of working backwards from there and kind of reverse engineering. Okay, then now to your point, like, where are you resisting? What's that causing? I love that you said, like, let's get to the root cause. One of my favorite things is to ask why 5 times. It's like a standard practice, but it really does help you get a little deeper into really, where is this
Right.
coming from? And that helps give you context, I think, around that what, because then you understand, okay, this is kind of the current status of where we are. And now that you know what the goal is, then you can kind of make your plan for moving
Right.
forward.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's say someone's in a job or they're in their career and it's draining them. They've identified kind of at this point, I know I'm burned out. I know something needs to change, but they're terrified to make a change because maybe it looks crazy on paper. And given that you've kind of done this on your own, what is your best advice for making that kind of gutsy move? Maybe they've already made the smaller gutsy moves at this point, but to be able to do that without completely like blowing everything up or blowing up their life.
Yeah, sometimes people do want to blow it up. And if that's your
Okay,
jam, trust it.
rock on.
However, if that's not your jam, that feels too risky, that feels too big, that's okay. We don't need to blow it up. We need to take an intentional next move. We have to start moving with focus and intention, not just fly by night, not just throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like, okay, have you decided if you're going to stay or if you're going to go? I know that sounds very simple and foundational, but truly, have you asked yourself, like, have you decided if you're going to stick it out? And if you are, what are you going to do? Are you going to ask for a different position? Are you moving to a different team? Are you moving to another location? Are you asking to go remote? Right? Like, those are the types of questions to ask yourself if you're staying. Or am I leaving? Okay, have you decided that you're going to quit? Where a lot of people get stuck is in indecision. They're wavering back and forth. They're in both spaces. They've not fully committed to either one, which means anything that they do doesn't move anywhere. They don't get any further ahead. In fact, they just get more frustrated because nothing's changing. But the back problem, if we backpedal there for a second, you haven't made the decision on what you're going to do. Making a decision does not mean that you have to do it today. Like, if you decide you're going to quit your job, I'm not suggesting that you march into your boss's office and quit. You're the only one that's going to know if and when you need to do that. But deciding that you're going to quit says, okay, body, okay, universe, okay, things that I see in my life, I'm ready for a change. And making that decision allows you to then start taking action that supports that decision. I'm updating my resume. I'm starting to look on Indeed. I'm updating and making sure that my LinkedIn is fresh and polished. I'm starting to peruse on the internet and see what's out there. I'm starting to talk to my friends differently. Now your brain is scanning for opportunity. It's scanning for change. It's scanning for your next move. But only because you've decided and because you started to move in that direction. This is where change actually happens. We can think about something all day long. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. You have to move. And that move can be as simple as I've decided I'm going to leave. And today, the only thing that I'm going to do is update my resume. That's a gutsy move. Okay. Now we've got motion. Now we've got some traction. Okay. That's done. Because that's done. Now I can update my Indeed. Because that's done. Now I can update this. Because that's done. Now I can send an email to that person that I met at a networking event 6 months ago. You know what I mean? Like, we're building. Gutsy moves are all about building. And that creates that momentum. And ultimately, it's going to lead you to the right decision. Notice I never said that you knew where you were going to go next. I never said that you had a perfect plan there. I said you are making intentional moves that support the fact that you are going to quit. It's all going to come into place. Stop trying to figure it all out today.
Yeah. I think that's the hard part for a lot of folks, right? Because that unknown is what they're resisting. Back to
Oh
our
yeah,
conversation
you're resisting
before.
the unknown. You're resisting the what ifs. You're resisting the change. But what's more uncomfortable? Getting uncomfortable and figuring it out, or staying in this same discomfort for the rest of your life? Like if I told you today, okay, if you're not going to decide, this is the position that you're going to stay in for the next 40 years. If you want to vomit or throw your keyboard across the table, wake up, sister. It's time to make a change. And that change doesn't mean you have to know it all. You just need to commit to what you're going to do and then take the steps after it.
The momentum builds after you kind of take each small step, right? And I I really focus on like, what am I learning from this? So if I'm updating my resume, what data can I gather from this experience? Not just like my resume itself, but like the experience of updating my resume when I'm looking at jobs. And I notice which jobs I'm naturally drawn to or which jobs I'm automatically discounting myself for whatever reason because I don't think I'm qualified or what have you. That's data. That's telling me something. So I can build off of that information. It's like kind of putting together, I'm a nerd. So it's putting together like a research paper, right? You want to have your different pieces of information and then you can start to put it in a logical order and kind of come up with your hypothesis or what's going to happen and run your experiment and do all that.
Yeah, that you're gathering information to help support your next steps. But again, that's only possible because you've decided that you're going to do something and you started to take some kind of action. I know a lot of people get really caught up in like, what's the right next thing to do? Or where do I focus? Or there's too many things like, oh, that's too much. It's too big and too scary. And then what happens? Our brain shuts down and we do nothing. Right. So if you're wanting to change a job and you're like, I don't even know what kind of job I would want next. That seems too big. So I'm just going to keep going to this job that's sucking the soul out of my ass. Right. Like, okay, hold on. Let's back up for a second. You don't have to know what you want to do next, but you have to be willing to figure it out. And
that's part of the
exactly. That's getting on and looking at like, okay, let's look at my salary. Is this the right kind of salary? Am I not making enough? Okay, do I want to stay local? Do I want to go remote? Like just start experimenting and getting curious about, okay, if I could craft what this next career move looks like, what would be best case scenario for me? And then just start researching. Again, you're not committing to anything. Nobody's going to hunt you down because you're scrolling on Indeed trying to figure out what everyone's paying. I mean, some ads might retarget you, but like
algorithm will get you, but that's about it.
After you, but that's okay. We can say we hide this ad, right? But you're just going into it with curiosity. It takes the pressure off of needing to figure out, and it gives you information so that you can make a decision that works best for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I resonate so much with that, what you were saying about it'll find you, right? Because so I quit my corporate job and I had nothing. I didn't have a plan. To quote Friends, I had a Like I was there. I knew I wanted to start something. I didn't know what the heck that something was going to be. And it took some time figuring it out, but it was all part of the experimental process. And it was still momentum to get me here. And like that was even, that was very gutsy for me to just quit and go about. And I'm with you. I don't recommend that for everybody because it is not
It's
easy.
not easy. And
Um,
everyone has a different tolerance for risk.
yeah.
I my
Uh,
don't ever measure my tolerance for risk because I like mine is it's just I'll do some shit because I know I'll figure it out. But that's not the right path for everybody, you know? And it sounds like the same thing for you. You quit without a plan. But that works for you. Some people thrive in that space of there are no other options and I have to figure it out. Somebody else, that's going to completely shut them down. You know what I mean? They need something
yeah.
grounded. They need some kind of plan. They need some kind of next step. And knowing where you fall in that spectrum is really important. So don't try to mimic what somebody else is doing because it looks like it's working for them. You gotta trust yourself on that.
Yeah. And I'll say, typical Tara is not that type of person, but my husband is very much that type of person. And because I had his support, he was like, we'll figure it out. Something will happen. He's like, he had more faith in me than
Yeah.
I did at the moment. And I needed that. And obviously like I had the right support network and all that too. So, but I get it. Like you have to define what the gutsy is for you and what pushes you enough, but doesn't break you essentially. Like there's like going to your edge, but then there's also falling off the cliff kind of situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know that there's a perfect answer to that either. Like
No,
we're all
that's
yeah, it's
life.
life. We're all people. Everything is always in motion. Variables are always changing. And you're the only one that's going to know when you're like, okay, hold on, I got to pause for a second. Okay, hold on, I need to reroute here. But that comes into paying attention to your body, paying attention to your surroundings, being realistic about things. I'm all about um energetics and trusting the universe and all that stuff too. And I also am a firm believer in logic. And okay, hey, something's got to shift here, or I need to do something different. Where do I need to shift my energy so that I can help call this in? Like it's an ever moving and ever evolving situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit because you said you had your own business before you kind of transitioned into what you're doing now. So you've been a business owner for quite some time. And so looking back kind of over your entire career trajectory, what has been for you like the gutsiest move that you've made? And what did it teach
Hmm.
you?
So I've been in business for 18 years. It's been a minute and a half. And I'm going to answer this in two ways. On paper, it would look like the gutsiest move that I made was when I sold my agency and left the industry. I mean, that's pretty gutsy. I'm not going to discount that. that
By any
that
definition
took
of the
that
word.
took a whole lot of letting go and a whole lot of trusting, and a lot of inner work. So that on paper is probably the gutsiest move that I've made. However, starting that business was pretty darn gutsy. I left my job when I was six and a
Hmm.
half months pregnant. I was designing ads at the phone book. Yeah, the phone book. It was just as exciting. Oh yeah,
Phone
that old
book.
that old archaic love of ours. Back when we had to, flip through to find a phone number. Yeah, that was my first job out of college. I quit that job when I was 6.5 months pregnant to start the business. Also a gutsy move. However, I would not define either one of those as my most gutsy move. I think the gutsiest move that I made in my business was in the midst of COVID, after I had to fire my team and pack up all my stuff and move back into my basement office by myself and take back over every role in my business because in branding and marketing, the first thing to get cut when budgets are tight are who? Marketing. I knew what was going to happen, so I had to make a really hard decision. But I also had to make that really hard decision because of a bunch of other decisions that I made leading up to that. I realized that I had unintentionally built my business on the backbone of my insecurities. And so while the business looked great online and on paper, I was completely falling apart. I had 6 months worth of my own paychecks laying on my desk uncashed. It was laying next to a foreclosure letter warning from our mortgage company. And in the moment, I can remember it was a couple months after shutdown. I was sitting in the basement. The dust had settled for the day. I was sitting by the lamp at my desk, and I kind of kicked back in my chair and I leaned back and I was like, what does Laura want? And I realized in that moment, I hadn't asked myself that question in probably over a decade. And I answered myself honestly. And I think that was the gutsiest move that I've ever made, was answering myself honestly in one of my most vulnerable moments when everything literally had fallen apart. I was in survival mode in every way possible. And I got honest about what I wanted to do next. I was like, I want to speak. Like, I'd already been speaking, but not getting paid. The Gutsy podcast was already up and running at that point. Like, I was already starting to do this work. The tables had started to tip in another direction, but I was like, I'll do branding till the day I die, right? And no, turns out, fast forward, spoiler alert, I'm not. But I was like, I want to speak. I want to help women do the things that they really want to do. I want to get on stages. I want to be in rooms where I'm talking to women that are having breakthroughs and they're having like this beautiful release of a cry, and then we're hugging at the end, and then they go off and do what they really want to do in life. Like, that shit lights me up. Why am I sitting in this basement by myself trying to force this to happen? That's the gutsiest move that I ever made, was answering that question, because right after that, I reserved LauraAura.com. I built out my website, which was a total mess at that point because I had no idea what I wanted to do yet or how I wanted to structure it or what any of this looked like. But I made it. Mm-hmm. And I started to experiment with it. And I started to play with different offers and what my speaking style was. And I was already starting to form what that was. But, I got the business back to a healthy place. It was growing again. I built my team in a very different way the second time around. It got to a really healthy place. And then I got to another pivot point where it was like, okay, what do you want to do? Are you going to keep going with the agency? Or are you going to let it go and go all in on speaking like you said you wanted to? And I made that decision to let it go. I was able to sell the agency. And now I'm a full-time keynote speaker and coach. So I believe in my heart and soul that the gutsiest move I've ever made was asking myself the question, what do you actually want? Answering it honestly, and then backing it up with the actions that supported it.
And I would add, just from hearing that story, revisiting it regularly too.
Yeah, it wasn't overnight. That was 2020. I sold the agency in 23. So 2.5, 3 years. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't a quick fix. I did not hack it. I let things continue to unfold the way that they were supposed to. I let the death grip off of the control, because one of the final points where I was like, oh, okay, what am I going to do here? Was, our largest agency client at the time, was their contract was ending. It's finished. But inside, I was like, I don't want to replace them. I'm like, oh, there's some information to work with. Another sign was I got asked to speak at a women's event, which normally I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. They wanted me to speak about branding. My whole body turned inside out. It was like, if you talk about branding on that stage, I'm going to trip you on the stairs on the way up. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, there's not a single ounce of me that wants to get up there and talk about branding. I don't want to be known as a speaker that talks about branding. But I didn't know that. I thought maybe that might have been part of my path until it presented itself. And I'm like, nope, more information. That's not what I want. Ooh, there's some there's some more, ammo that I got to work with here. So it wasn't a quick fix, and the tables just adjusted ever so slightly, but I kept leaning into it. I kept being curious. I kept asking questions. I kept following what felt good or interesting or exciting. And I started to let go of the things that felt heavy or draining or made me cranky. and it worked.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I think I can relate to a lot of what you were saying, and just based on my conversations with folks, I'm sure there's going to be a lot there. And once again, it's a good example of defining what gutsy means for you. And, you started like on paper, it probably would have been this, or people might think it's this, but to you, it was something completely different. It was asking yourself that on the outside is like, oh, one simple question, but it's not a simple question. It's quite a convoluted question.
And, I'll touch on real quick, because I think that you asked this and I want to make sure I answer it. When it looks crazy on the outside, what are other people going to say? Or you have friends and family that, seemingly mean well, but they're projecting their own insecurities or their own worries onto you. Well, how are you going to do this? And how are you going to do that? And what about this? And you're like, that can get very confusing very quickly, because their fear becomes your fear. Unless you're very intentional about separating that, which also begins with being very intentional about who you're talking about these types of changes with. Talking to trusted mentors, people that can help guide and support you, people that are notorious to tell you the truth, right? Like, be very intentional about who you tell your dreams and your changes to, because that really makes a difference. I would be lying if I didn't say that there were quite a few times where I was like, people are going to think that I've lost my mind. Because I also we had a commercial building, and I sold that 3 months after I sold the business. Like, I let go of everything. I sold everything. I'm like, people are going to be like, okay, early midlife crisis, perhaps. And, some of the dialogue in my mind was like, people are going to be like, your whole reputation is built in running a branding agency. This is what you have your degrees are in. This is what your background's in. How are you going to make money? How are you going to shift over here? What are you going to do over here? Why would you let all that go? And it's like, because I want to. Whatever you say or think about what I'm doing, I don't care. I can't care. I can't afford to care.
Yeah.
Mentally, I can't afford to care. Financially, I couldn't afford to care. Emotionally, I couldn't afford to care. Like, at some point, you just have to say, I know and trust that I'm doing what's right for me. And whatever you think about what that is, that's yours. It's not mine. I have to do what's right for me. And it doesn't need to make sense to you. So I just wanted to slide that back across the table, because there will be people that question you. There will be people that tell you that it's a bad idea. Come back to you. Come back to you. Does this feel right? Does this feel interesting? Does this feel like something's pulling or tugging at you and you're just like, I can't put it on paper, but I just know that it makes sense? Trust that over anybody else's opinion always.
Yes. Well, I think that's how I want to wrap this up, but I have one more question. And that is, so this podcast is all about balanced living with badass results. So how do you define being a balanced badass in your own life?
A balanced badass. Balanced badass to me means prioritizing my body and my mind and what I need as a physical human being, while doing the cool shit that I know that I'm supposed to do. Like, I mean, I think you can probably tell fairly quickly. I'm pretty raw. I'm pretty blunt. I talk about things the way that they are, and it resonates with the right people, and that's fantastic. I love being who I am. I spent a long time trying to not be me, and I love being me, and I think that's very badass. And it's balanced with this softer side of very slow mornings I don't usually start working until at least 9:30, 10 o'clock. I sit with my coffee and enjoy the space that I've created in the home that I've worked very hard for. And so there's this balance of softness with this gutsy me that you get on a regular basis.
Yeah, I love that. This was such a good conversation. I really just appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights and all of that jazz. Now, before we wrap up though, where can folks find you if they want to work with you, if they want to just follow along on your journey? Where can we where can we
Yeah,
find that?
LauraAura.com. It's LauraAura.com. Is the hub for all things me. You'll find all my programs and my social links and all that stuff there. If you want a good one next step, I might encourage you to subscribe to the Gutsy Podcast. So if you like this type of conversation, if you like this directness, if you like the actionable, like, okay, I'm ready to do the thing, but we're kind of baby step and building the confidence to do it, the Gutsy Podcast is a great next step.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. This
Yeah,
was
thanks
really
for
great.
having me.
Yeah. And friend, if you're listening to this episode and something resonated with you, I hope you'll share it with a friend or a colleague or even just email it to yourself as a reminder later on. And also, when you subscribe to the Gutsy podcast, don't also forget to subscribe if you haven't already to the Balanced Badass podcast. And as always, I'll catch you next time. We'll be here right back in the same place. And until then, be sure to make good choices, friend.